Welcome to the regular board meeting of the Desert Water Agency for June 3rd, 2025. I'd like to call this meeting to order and ask that folks in the room who are present with us this morning mute their electronic devices, and those that are participating remotely keep their microphones silenced until they're ready to speak during public comment. And with that, I'm going to ask, for discussion and questions, I'll call on directors in the following roll call order: Director Gracia, Director McKenna, Secretary Treasurer Bloomer, Vice President Bowman, and President Ortega, and all votes will be conducted via the roll call. And with that, I'll ask Director Gracia to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Of course, thank you. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Right. And before we proceed, I'm going to try to figure out how to turn this screen on.
Oh.
Where's the button? Thank you. Well, I have a blue light. I don't know what that means. There it goes. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right. So with that, can we proceed with the roll call, please?
Director Gracia,
Present.
Director McKenna,
Present.
Secretary Treasurer Bloomer,
Present.
Vice President Bowman,
Present.
and President Ortega.
Present.
All present.
Thank you. We can move to item 4, which is public comment on those items not on today's agenda. This would be for matters related to the business of the Desert Water Agency. Members of the public may comment. We ask that you keep your comments to no more than 3 minutes. As provided in the Brown Act, the board is prohibited from acting on any items that are not listed on today's agenda. Ms. Baca, have we received any public comments ahead of time?
No comments have been received.
All right. Are there any members of the public in the audience or online that would like to speak at this point? Seeing none, we can move to the next item, which is item 5, public comment for items that are listed on today's agenda. Again, we ask that you keep your comments to no more than 3 minutes. Are there any members of the public that would like to speak on one of today's agenda items? Seeing none, we can move to item 6, which is our consent calendar. Items that are listed under the consent calendar are considered to be routine and will be acted upon by one motion of the board without discussion. There'll be no separate discussion on any of these items unless a board member requests a specific item to be discussed and or removed from the consent calendar for separate action. Are there any items on today's consent calendar that a board member would like to have pulled for further discussion? No? All right. So that means we can, pardon me.
I move item, I move item 6 as presented.
All right, thank you. I have a first from Director Gracia
I'll second.
and a second from Secretary Treasurer Bloomer. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Director Gracia,
Aye.
Director McKenna,
Aye.
Secretary Treasurer Bloomer,
Aye.
Vice President Bowman,
Aye.
and President Ortega.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Right, that leads us to item 7, which is an action item. 7A, Energy Resilience Plan Contract Negotiations. General Manager Johnson, please.
Thank you, President Ortega and members of the board. This item here is our Energy Resiliency Plan contract negotiations. So we did bring this to the executive committee last week, and that committee requested that we bring this to an action item. And just some background, so back on March 4th, the agency, we emailed our RFP out to 31 companies. That list of 31 companies was derived from Western Riverside Council of Governments Energy Resiliency Plan RFP had a list of companies. Also, couple years ago or so, CVWD put together an alternative energy feasibility study RFP and a climate action and adoption plan RFP. From those three different RFPs, we took the companies and sent our RFP out. And as part of the RFPs, any company that intended to submit a proposal had to notify us of an intent to propose by March 18th. We received 5 ITPs. Then on May 13th was the day proposals were due. Out of the 5 ITPs, we received 3 proposals. One from AECOM Technical Services, Inc. They're out of Los Angeles with about 49,000 employees worldwide, very large company. Thornton Tomasetti was the second company out of New York, with about 1,700 employees. And the third proposal was from SNC Electric Company, main offices out of Chicago, with about 4,100 employees worldwide. Once we received these proposals, the agency then put together an evaluation team to review the proposals. That team was made up of the general manager, the assistant general manager, our engineering manager, and then a staff engineer. And the criteria is listed below here on this table. There was a technical approach that was weighted as 40%, proposers' capabilities at 15%, proposals' experience and staffing at 15%, fee of 20% weighted, and then the schedule and references both for 5%. Our results after each individual review is listed in this table below. AECOM had an average of 4.05, which was the highest ranked out of the 3 proposals. And then we listed here the cost of each proposal. AECOM's, they are not the cheapest. They are the middle at $318,909. They are the quickest as far as timeline, which is 46 weeks. Our estimate of $125,000, that came from there was a company that decided not to submit a proposal, and we reached out to them, and they advised that their opinion would be about $125,000 to put the proposal together, or the RFP cost would be around $125,000. We did then take that and we included that in the budget for 2025, 2026, which will be approved by the board here and then at the next board meeting. And also, just to give you some background, back in 2020, CVWD's Climate Action Adoption Plan, they awarded that for $99,988. So the fiscal impact to the agency would be a minimum, if we went with AECOM, of $318,909. That does not include staff time. At this time, we haven't evaluated how much time it would take, but we would have to include that in our overall cost. So based on the proposal submitted, staff ranked AECOM as the highest evaluated company. and would select them to perform the work. However, based on the proposal amount, staff is recommending not to move forward with contract negotiations with AECom. And staff is also recommending not to move forward with the remaining two companies. It is staff's opinion that the energy resilience plan may have been too ambitious for us, and maybe we should scale back and consider putting together a plan similar to what CVWD did with that the CAP plan, which is that climate action and adoption plan. And with that, I would be happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
Thank you. Director Groscher, we'll start with you, please. Your mic not on, I don't think.
I'm sorry. I don't have any questions, but I want to thank you for the work you did on this. I appreciate it thoroughly. I think you came to the right conclusion, plural. Since this was brought to the board, initiated this, since then, the change in the landscape has been turned on its head with the president overturning the what would you call it? All those financial opportunities to make these things work have been eliminated, as I understand it, and there are very basic questions that I have that I don't think this proposal would address. Where would we put this? And how can we be assured that it would be financially beneficial to the district? I haven't been able to answer those questions, but I want to find those answers myself. I don't want that to come from a consultant. So as a director, all by myself, I feel like I still have work to do. And I know the federal government and their, all the financial benefits that they offer to, and the changes that have happened since this kind of first, I as one director, I'm not ready to put this district in that. And I could see it taking a couple of years to get comfortable with where we're at, what those opportunities are. So I don't want anyone to think that I want not to continue down the path of finding a way to make this work, because I think there is a way to make it work. But I don't think I'm at the point where I want to jump in with this until I get a better feel on what happens with CVWD and their current negotiations with IID. I mean, they just created a new JPA that I want to know more about and see if there's a possibility that the work that we might do as an agency here could, we need a customer if we're going to generate electricity, and I'm not sure Edison is the customer. So just a kind of a brief synopsis of the way I see it. I have too many questions that I need to find answers to, and I won't be able to get those from those answers, or that confidence that I need from a salesman or a consultant. Thanks.
And President Ortega, may I say one more thing?
Mm-hmm.
One thing that the board should consider is that we are facing the conservation as a way of California life, and that's going to change our use of power drastically. And we may want to consider getting maybe a couple years into that to see what our power use is before we get into this type of plan. That's something that the board may want to consider.
Thank you. Director McKenna.
Yeah, I think we have to recognize the shifting landscape that we live in. You know, this time last year, there were considerable financial incentives from the federal government. It could be 3 years before this was under construction. What the federal policy will be in 3 years, I have no idea. What it will be in 3 minutes, I have no idea. But against that argument, we have to also consider the basic physics is not changing. You know, we have very significant energy use. It's expensive. It's ranging in, what, $20 per customer per month. We pass through to Edison. I would like to deal with it. I don't. I regret that these proposals didn't come in, you know, with better numbers. I would be interested in an alternative. I would support this even as it is, because in the overall scheme of things, $300,000, it's not a small sum of money, but we spend, if you scroll down the page to Secretary Treasurer's report, we spend $30,000 to $40,000 a month on landscape maintenance. We generate about $1 million a month from operations that goes into reserves. In addition to that, the finance department generates another $1 million or $2 million a month that goes into reserves. The first treasurer's report I presented showed we had reserves of $275 million and at par value. Now they're $350 million in just 2 years and 3 months. We have the resources to do this. It may be expensive. I don't think it will be. I think it will save money in the long run. I would like to pursue it. I would be interested in alternatives if the board votes this down, as they well may. The issue will not go away. The issue is important. It's important to our customers, important to us. So, that's all I say.
Thank you. Secretary Treasurer Bloomer.
I think it's important, like General Manager Johnson said, with all the changes in rules and regulations with conservation as a California way of life that we're going to have to comply with here coming up in the next few years. So to see where we're at after that, I think is smart in moving forward, rather than getting into a plan that may not fit within those schemes or, you know, policy guidelines. So I'm open to an alternative plan, like something like CVWD did as well, that maybe isn't as comprehensive and altering.
Thank you. Vice President Bowman.
Yes, thank you, staff, for doing the research. I was shocked at the amount of money that they were putting forth for this. The good news, I think, Gerald, because I was with you on this, is that I think everybody's been sensitized to the fact that we should be looking at these things a little bit carefully, our energy use, how we can mitigate that. So with all the things that have come down, I do agree that the landscape has changed, but the needs and the ongoing is still going to be there. So I consider it a positive thing that everybody is now sensitized to it, and that we will be watching, all of us, how we can better produce energy or save energy for our customers.
Thank you. I just want to ask staff a few questions that did come up during the executive committee meeting last Thursday morning. There was mention of, I believe it was Mr. Tate, who spoke about the amount of land that would not only need to be available to support a project like this, but in addition, the amount of land that would need to be set aside as a mitigation for this. So I'd like to just, if you could briefly inform the rest of the board about what that could look like. I'd also like to, one of the other things that came up in that meeting was the possibility of, for the time being, focusing our attention on the existing solar field that we have, or two that we have, and whether there could be investment made there that would potentially, at least in the short term, bring in more power that we'd be generating ourselves and using ourselves and potentially selling back to Southern California Edison. And then I'd also like to consider the creation of a subcommittee that might look into these matters further. including what actually is Coachella Valley Water District doing with their alternate plan, what the involvement with the, and that Director Gracia had mentioned, and I can't recall the name of the actual group, but this Joint Powers Authority on the east end of the valley, what that might look like in terms of our possible involvement. I think that those might be questions that could be explored in a subcommittee that then could come back to this board, and then maybe that would be a good opportunity, and this is just my thought, would be a good opportunity to reevaluate what an RFP might look like in terms of what we might go out with next. Because I do agree that this is not something that we can just sort of wish away. And the making conservation a California way of life would be part, I believe, would be part of that conversation, because we'd have to be looking at what our long-term energy needs are going to be, even in an environment where we're selling less water to the public. So, Mr. Tate, if you could start.
Thank you, President Ortega. I've been thinking about this for quite a bit since I put out the RFP and what it would take. I looked at an average well, say well 37's 450 horsepower, has an 800 amp service that's 460 volts, consumes about 2.2 million kilowatts per year. And to supply that would take about 6,000 panels for that one well for the day. So if you say, okay, it's sunny half the day and it's dark the other half, so you have to provide, it would take about 6,000 panels to keep it running during the day. Those 6,000 panels would take about 4 acres, 4 to 6 acres, depending on layout and size and configuration of the land. The other half of the day, when it's not sunny, you would have to store, you'd have to generate power and store it. So you'd have to generate an equal amount of power. So that would take about 6,000 panels. It'd be about, again, another 4 to 6 acres. And it would take maybe 2 Tesla Megapacks that can hold, 4 megawatts of power for the evening that would be generated during the day. So each site would be about 8 to 12 acres of power, for a solar array, and plus the battery pack. Then I looked at how many well sites we have running on any day, and as of yesterday, we had 16 wells running. Also looked at boosters. We have nine boosters running. And to make it simple, I added up all the horsepower of the boosters, divided by 450, and made a well equivalent. So that would be 3 to 4 wells worth of power for the boosters. So in total, you have about 20 wells or well equivalents running per day. So that system would require 240,000 solar panels, take up 160 to 200 acres just for the solar array. That doesn't include layout land, driving, or anything like that. Battery storage, inverter buildings, a transformer or substation. We use the power at 460, but if you tried to transfer it around town, you'd probably raise the voltage up to move it, a higher voltage, less amp draw. So you'd have to have a Edison-style substation to increase the voltage. And then there's the CEQA mitigation land that I had mentioned previously. I've dealt with a wind turbine developer, and their mitigative land was 12 acres for every 1 acre of disturbed land, and that was in the wash near Windy Point. Now, not everywhere is going to have the same acreage. It really depends on the habitat that you're disrupting. I've heard some 4 or 5 acres per acre of land disturbed, so there's a scaling factor. So if you took 160 acres and multiplied it by 5, that might be what you would have to purchase to do this, and then that would be land held in trust by a nonprofit. And so you're looking 1,000 acres they would have to purchase, and
4/5 of a giveaway. So that would be a significant land purchase.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson,
Yeah.
could you comment on the or maybe let's talk a little bit more about what investing in our current resources, solar resources, might look like?
Yes, President Ortega. So we do have 2 arrays currently. We have an array that was built in 2005 that supplies power to the operations building. It's around a 350 kW array. It is 20 years old. It's reaching its life expectancy. It's currently, I believe, operating within the tolerance of that the panels were specified at. I believe the efficiency now is maybe in the 80% or so. Is that correct? There could be an opportunity to, since we have the infrastructure in place and it's reaching that 20-year limit, I know we still have the original inverters of that array, which is unheard of. Typically, those have a life expectancy of around 10 to 12 years. We put them in a building that had air conditioning. We think that's why they've lasted so long. I think there is an opportunity to invest money in that array. I'm sure new panels are more efficient and probably take up less space. We could generate enough power to obviously operate the operations center and then send power back to Edison. And our other array, which operates the reclamation plant, that's around a 715 kilowatt array that was built around 10 years ago. Obviously, it has not reached its life expectancy. However, there may be opportunities to investigate how we could get more efficient with that array. And so that, I think, would be something that we definitely can consider.
Thank you. And what would it take to put together a subcommittee on energy?
Well, I would believe that the board president would need to select 2 board directors to head that committee. I don't know, Mr. Riddell, is there anything that legally we would have to do to create a subcommittee?
No, the board president can do that, with board concurrence.
Okay. All right. Well, so I'd like to open this up for more discussion, if you'd like, starting with Director Grasha.
I had I mentioned the lunch update that I attended on the 6th with the district attorney. One of the guys at the table was a member of the board of the combined CVWD IID electric Coachella Valley Community Electric Group, whatever it's called. And we talked about how things seem to be progressing, how it appears that comments made by the president over at CVWD that there's likely to be a real sea change in the way things are done with electricity in the IID service area of the Coachella Valley, which is everything from the Riverside County line up to Washington Street, basically Thousand Palms. And, there are people down there that are completely up to date on what's going on. I see it, the possibility of them being a customer. Everything that Mr. Tate just talked about is the reason why I don't want to touch our system. But it doesn't mean that we can't generate power and potentially see a return on investment that's large enough to make it worth it. But, you know, the answers to those 1,000 questions that are going to come up as a result of that can't be answered, in my view, satisfactorily through an agreement like this. But the answers are out there. And to have the confidence that it would take, at least for me as one director, to step off into that abyss, I got to know what is the end result. And I think you're 100% right about a subcommittee. And there's fascinating changes on, you know, currently going on. And I think it would be great if our board at least had an idea of how things were progressing. You know, people say things and I hear words completely different than they're said, but what I heard from Mr. Powell at the last couple of meetings ago was that, hey, we're taking it back. Whether that happens or not, whether they kind of negotiate, I don't, you know, they have at least the authority for IID to provide power in that area of the Coachella Valley up until 2030. And they have the, as I understand it, the ability to bring back that to CVWD to become the power authority in that area. So it's, I don't know if he was, you know, negotiating for a better deal, or if he is truly of the opinion that it might be time for a takeover. So we'll have to wait and see, but the possibilities, if they bring it to the Coachella Valley, for our agency to have some involvement, I think are too great not to be paying attention and kind of following it along. So I agree with your idea about the subcommittee.
Okay, thank you, Director McKenna.
Well, I agree with you. I think there's so much detail in this, and as you said, in the shifting landscape, it's impossible to track day by day just what's the best option. So a subcommittee sounds like a good idea to me. What's going on with Coachella Valley Water District and the IAD? We should be involved in that. You know, there are places where we have a well on one side of the wash and they have a well on the other. And the idea that we should, you know, we can't cooperate, we should cooperate with them, whatever they're doing. They will find a way to get that cheaper energy that IAD currently provides, and Edison does not. Yeah, there's all kinds of possibilities and new technology and new federal regulations. And what Assistant General Manager Tate said is very, very relevant. You know, if we disturb endangered species or threatened species habitat, we have a whole new can of worms. I'm hoping we don't, but in some of these instances, some of these well sites, we probably would. So when you see the plethora of detail, it's not for a body like this to navigate its way through all these details. I think a subcommittee is a great idea. I'll volunteer to be on it.
Okay, well, I would put you on that if that's what we decide to do. Secretary Treasurer Bloomer.
I don't have any more questions, but I do agree that I think the subcommittee is a good idea.
Okay, and Vice President Bowman? Nothing else for me. Okay. My thought with regard to the subcommittee is that, again, as has been mentioned, there are a lot of moving parts here, there are a lot of unknowns, there are a lot of questions. What kind of support would we be able to get from staff or another outside consultant to support the work of that subcommittee? I mean, we have a very knowledgeable member of our board who seems to follow these things quite a lot, but again, I don't know this is all within your wheelhouse either. And so I'm curious what that might look like in terms of supporting the efforts of that subcommittee, whether it's through staff and or an outside body.
Yeah, I'm curious too.
I know I'm just throwing this at you this morning.
No, I'm sure. Obviously, we would need to sit down, and the next general manager signs would need to sit with the board, with the committee, and work through a plan. Mm-hmm. And and then take some steps, maybe reach out to other agencies that have gone through the CVWD and so forth, get some ideas, and you need a plan of how you're going to approach this. To not have a plan would be a bad idea, and maybe a consultant at that point could help you develop that type of plan that's not so comprehensive, and which would then allow you to take your steps. Again, it's those baby steps that you need to do.
So, Mr. Riddell, is this, would there be an action here where where the board would vote to create the subcommittee, or is that something that I can do?
I would recommend that it merely be appointed by the board president rather than action by the board. If there's action by the board, it probably would turn it into a standing committee instead of an ad hoc committee.
Oh, okay. Thank you. All right. So with that, then there really isn't going to be an action here today.
Well, the
Or-
action today would
Oh,
be
to
is
be our-
to
yes.
not move forward with
Right.
negotiations.
To
with,
accept the staff report is basically.
That's correct.
You're saying, yes. Okay,
So-
right.
Don't want to get too far into the motion yet, but because I want to, it might be as simple as just appointing a director to attend those meetings and make those, that's new JPA and the IID, the Coachella Valley Community Electric Association meetings. I don't think that's their full name or the right name, but be, and because that's where the information is going to come from on a lot of this stuff. So it might not be necessary to actually create a subcommittee, but just go out and get more comfortable with some of those big questions. So it's up to you. So
Okay. Well, let's focus first on the action, and then we'll,
I'll move this staff recommendation.
all right.
I'll second.
I have a first from Director Gracia and a second from Secretary Treasurer Bloomer. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Director Gracia,
Aye.
Director McKenna,
Aye.
Secretary Treasurer Bloomer,
Aye.
Vice President Bowman,
Aye.
and President Ortega.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right, thank you. All right, next is 8A, a discussion item, making conservation a California way of life, and that would be Mr. Elliott. Good morning.
Hi, morning. So thank you. So just to give a little bit of background on this, other than what's written up there. So we have been talking about making conservation a California way of life for a long time, probably basically since 2018 when the legislation initially passed and 2023 when the regulation was finalized. We have been working behind the scenes within conservation as the conservation team to try to get us better prepared and better able to address some of the challenges that making conservation a California way of life brings about. Lately, we've been having a lot of our meetings with the executive management team and bringing some updates to the Public Affairs and Conservation Committee. And at the last meeting, they kind of asked us to do this discussion item and to bring more information to you regarding the challenges that we're facing. So this is meant to be kind of the teaser, and then tomorrow we will be meeting at the board workshop to go over a lot of this in a lot more detail. But just to give you the overview for those who may not be aware, so making conservation a California way of life is based on that SB 606 and AB 1668. What the regulation actually does in a simplified term is it sets what they call an urban water use objective. So you can kind of think of it as a budget for the whole agency. The state is saying how many gallons of water we are allowed to use in order to stay in compliance with their regulation. In addition, it sets these CII performance measures. These are meant to be kind of efficiency standards for businesses. So the regulation itself doesn't regulate the businesses, but it asks us to give them some best management practices in order to increase the efficiency of their operations. Notably, I do want to just mention, so the urban water use objective standards decrease in 2030, 2035, and 2040. That 2030 is relatively minor. That 2035 is really significant, makes a big difference, and 2040 lands somewhere in the middle. But just because we are at a certain point today, it gets even more stringent as time goes on. I do want to go over really quickly the components of the urban water use objective. So starting with that square box and then going downward, you have residential indoor use, then going on to real water loss, so water loss from our pipes, outdoor residential use, and then CII landscapes with dedicated irrigation meters. So that's basically business use where there's not a mixed meter or a separate indoor meter. The other one that's very important for us is the horse there, but that's our variances. So the big variance that is extremely relevant to us and our population here is the seasonal population variance, because otherwise we couldn't account for the people who are here part of the year. Next slide, if you can. So this is maybe a little bit intimidating, excuse me, but these are real numbers. So this is what we actually reported last year. It's just to give you a sense of where we're at. So, excuse me, I'm going to see, I don't think the pointer is going to work, but sitting at the top there, you can sort of see the residential water use indoor and outdoor. In that first column, you see the 6.8 billion gallons. This whole regulation is in gallons because everything needs to be slightly different when you report it to the state, but we have 6.8 billion gallons of actual water use. Our water use objective as of today would be 3.8 billion gallons. And that's really kind of the big difference maker. As you go further down, you kind of see that they're at least a little bit closer, or we're projecting them to be a little bit closer. But the 3 billion or so gallons there, a little bit less because of the variance down there, but the 3 billion or so gallons is what is really kind of eating into our ability to meet the objective. As you go down into that first dark gray column, the 8.6 billion gallons are what we total out at, while our actual sum of the components in the urban water use objective is 5.9 billion gallons. So all told, that puts us about 31% over the objective. And we can go to the next slide if you're ready. So we're 31% over the objective today. When those standards start ratcheting down, we're projected to be over 40% over the objective by 2040. This is going to be politically, financially, administratively, and programmatically complex. Part of the reason that I am talking to you today is that there will be things, while our management team has been extremely supportive, while conservation is working very hard on this, there will also be things that are brought to the board where we need your support, your knowledge, and your opinions about whatever we are bringing forward. The first of those things coming up here, and we're going to go over in more detail about it in the workshop. But the first thing coming up here will hopefully be in the first meeting of July, which will be our non-functional turf ordinance. So we are moving on this, and we'll start moving pretty quickly. Hopefully within the next few years, we'll be coming to you a few times with some recommendations and some things that we need support on. What I do want to mention is that while we are currently over our objective, there is going to be what they call an alternative compliance pathway within the objective. So that will make sure that we are not technically out of compliance, because we'll be on this alternative compliance pathway. We will stay on that probably for the whole life of the regulation. That will give us the ability to show a consistent water savings over time and potentially stay in compliance that way, so that we're not immediately out of compliance. But we still need to be able to reach the objective by 2040 to qualify for the alternative compliance pathway. So we're still kind of hitting with that 40% at the end. Management and staff have met for some key initiatives. So those key initiatives are kind of what we're going to go over at our board workshop. And I do want to mention really quickly, while the urban water use objective is the larger portion of what we're concerned about right now, within the regulation, there is also an administrative piece with these CII performance measures, which staff is working on behind the scenes. But they require classification of all the businesses in DWA service area based on their business type. Annual reporting, so it's not just a matter of doing it once. You need to update those lists every year. You need to convert to dedicated irrigation meters if the landscape is over a certain size. And you need to provide best management practices, so things like incentives to all of your businesses. So we are working on that behind the scenes, but the urban water use objective is taking up a lot of oxygen here. So that is meant to be sort of a teaser of what we're going to talk about tomorrow. But if there are any questions or if I can assist or clarify anything, please let me know.
Thank you, Mr. Elliott. Director Grasha, do you have any questions that you'd like to put forward now, or you wait till tomorrow, or how would you like?
Well, I'll just point out the one thing that jumped off the page for me was the water loss. I looked into it a little bit. I'm looking forward to hearing a little bit about that. I understand the state has new reporting requirements about that, and I'm looking forward to hearing what that is and how it's going to come back in terms of encouraging us to figure out where all that water's going and maybe fixing it. I don't know if that's even a thing, but it'll be fun to learn.
I think it's a thing.
We will be talking about that a little bit more in detail tomorrow, but yes, our hope is that water loss gives us a little bit more space on that residential budget so that we are able to save water there and potentially not be as harsh on our residents when we are talking about those budgets. So
Good news. Thank you.
All right, Director McKenna?
Wow, you look at the magnitude of the savings that are required, I feel like calling in sick tomorrow. But we'll have to deal with it. Yeah. Yes.
We will. Secretary Treasurer Bloomer?
I'll save all my questions for tomorrow.
Yeah, all right.
Perfect.
And Vice President Bowman?
The start of the program, when does the start button? I mean, you have the actual gallons used, and that's currently right now. Would the state allow us to go backwards in time? Because we've had some measures in place to cut water use, and such as to then start our start button then.
So I do want to clarify a little bit. So we're reporting now, and that was required by the regulation. So this is fiscal year 23-24 and what we submitted on Jan 1, 2025. For the alternative compliance pathway, compliance begins 2027. So it's going to be based on the report that we submit in 2025, 2026, 2027. Based on the standards of those alternative compliance pathways, we think that we're going to qualify there. But we are already being kind of held subject to this regulation. We're already reporting all of the information, but they are holding off on actual compliance assessment until 2027. And by that point, I hope we are on the alternative compliance pathway so that we get a little bit more time to really launch our programs and be ready to face this by 2040.
All right, thank you.
Thanks so much. I don't have any other questions. We'll see you tomorrow afternoon.
All right.
Great.
Thank you all.
All right, item 8B is the draft fiscal year 2025-2026 operating general and wastewater budgets. We have somebody new at the dais.
Do
Good
have
morning.
somebody new. We have with us today Jason Slough. He is our current accounting supervisor who will be taking over for me as a finance director effective on July 4th. And so a part of the transition process, he has taken full charge of this budget during this budget cycle. And so I am going to pass it along to him, and he's been doing an excellent job.
Great, thank you. Good morning.
Good morning, President Ortega and members of the board. Here today to present the 25-26 proposed budget for the operating general and wastewater funds. Back on May 21st, we met with the Finance Committee and presented these budgets to the committee. We did have a couple of changes since then during our quality control review. So in the operating fund, we did have some expense reductions just related to some labor charges that had been duplicated. We also increased $20,000 for our Help to Others program, which wasn't included in the budget as presented to the Finance Committee. And then we were also able to do some additional additions to the reserve for operations. In the general fund, we had some additional expenses added related to some seminar and travel activity. And then we were able to do an analysis on our restricted state water project expenses and revenues, and we were able to set reserves for those since our meeting with the Finance Committee. So with that, I'll go ahead and launch into the budget highlights. We'll start with the operating fund. So we have a proposed water sales budget for 25-26 of $48.4 million. That's an increase of $6.9 million over last year's budget. This is primarily driven by two factors. We continue to see increased consumption over the last 2 years. And then this would also include rate increase effective January 1st of 2026, which is the third rate increase of the 5 increases in our current rate study. And so then recycled water sales, we have a smaller increase of $70,000, and that's just primarily due to the rate increase from 70 cents per HCF to 75 cents, which would also be effective January 1st of 2026. Or I'm sorry, that one is July 1st of this year. So overall for water revenue, we have a budget increase of $7 million compared to last year. For other operating revenue in the operating fund, we have a small increase of $237,000 compared to last year. And so our total operating revenue budget is an increase of $7.2 million compared to last year's budget. For non-operating revenues, we have a increase in interest revenue of a little less than $400,000. This is attributed to the bond interest rates that we've been able to invest in over the last couple of years, resulting in an increase in future interest revenues. So from an overall perspective for non-operating revenues, we have a budgeted increase of $780,000. Looking at the expense side on the operating fund, source of supply, we have an increase in the water replenishment expense of $913,000 from last year's budget. And this is driven by the increased demand. So since consumption is up, we pay a little bit more for additional water that we're pumping out of the ground. So overall, for source of supply, we have a budget increase of $980,000 compared to last year's budget. For pumping expenses, under maintenance of structures, we have a budget increase of $481,000. This is attributed to an extraordinary expense for electrical control replacements and a South Ridge booster upgrade that was included in our extraordinary expense budget for this year. Overall, pumping expenses reflect an increase of $742,000 compared to last year's budget. For regulatory water treatment expense, we have a proposed budget of increase of $176,000 compared to last year's budget. For transmission and distribution expense, under the maintenance of reservoirs, we have a budget increase of $601,000. This is attributed to some extraordinary expenses for recoding of various reservoirs and a Snow Creek Village reservoir. The total is about $1.1 million. That's about a $615,000 increase in extraordinary expense related to maintenance of reservoirs from last year. Maintenance of mains also reflects an increase of $468,000 from last year's budget. This is also due to an extraordinary expense for the replacement of deteriorating pipe and vaults at various well sites, as well as an adjustment to the City of Palm Springs valves. So overall, transmission and distribution expense reflects an increase of $1.3 million as compared to last year's budget. Customer account expense, there's an overall budget increase of $122,000 compared to last year's budget. For general and administrative expense, from an overall perspective, we have an increase of $544,000, which is just 3.2% compared to last year's budget. But I also wanted to highlight the budget for the water conservation grass removal. We have that set at $534,000. So that's about a decrease of $245,000 from last year's budget. And that's just attributed to the scale back of the turf buyback program. Regulatory expenses, we have an increase of $2,000 in the budget as compared to last year's budget. The Snow Creek Hydro expense, we have an increase of $297,000, which is attributable to an extraordinary expense request for this year for a Snow Creek, Falls Creek Hydro modernization project. And then for the recycled water plant expense, we have an increase of $712,000 in the pumping expense, which is attributable to an extraordinary expense for motor control center upgrades, totaling about $700,000. So overall, recycled water plant expense budget increased $543,000 as compared to last year's budget. So in total, for all expenses in the operating fund, the budget has increased to $52.2 million, which is about a $5.1 million increase over last year's budget. Looking at capital additions in the operating fund, so we have total proposed capital additions of $16.6 million, which is about a $4.1 million increase from last year's capital budget. Some of the highlights of that $16.6 million, we have about $6.7 million proposed for pipeline replacements, $6 million for the recycled water plant effluent reservoir number 2 roof reconstruction, and about $1.6 million in vehicle replacements to further our adherence to the AQMD standard. We do have about $32.7 million in capital addition carryover. So these are capital projects that have been approved in previous budget cycles that have not been completed, and so we still have funds out there available to spend. And just highlighting some of the major projects, about $13.9 million of that is for main and pipeline projects. And then we also had another about $5.6 million related to the effluent reservoir roof construction. So both of those plants need roof reconstruction. So taking all that into account, we did actually have funds left over to increase some of the reserves in the operating fund. So we currently have a proposed $1.1 million addition to the reserve for operations and a $900,000 reserve for retirement benefits. And next, we'll move to the general fund. Operating revenues in the general fund, we have a $1.3 million increase to replenishment assessments. So this is primarily attributable to two factors. We've seen increased consumption over the last couple of years, and then this also includes a rate increase to $235 per acre foot from $215. And then when we look at non-operating revenues for the general fund, we're actually proposing a reduced tax rate of 6 cents per $100 assessed value from 7 cents in last year's budget. And so the assessed valuation of all the within our boundary is about it increased by $2 million. So even with that reduction in the tax rate, we're only going to see a decrease in property tax revenues of about $338,000. And then, so when we consider what that tax rate is for the upcoming year, we look at future expenditures related to the state water project, and we project those out, and then we determine what the tax rate can be for us to be able to cover those expenses throughout the life of the project through 2035. And so we feel that this 6 cents, we should be able to ride that out for the remaining years through 2023. And so we've effectively smoothed that rate because we don't want to get in a situation where we're going up and down and changing that from year to year. Also, on the non-operating side for the general fund, we have an increase in interest revenue of $2.1 million as compared to last year. And once again, this is just attributable to the interest rates that we were able to secure over the last couple of years when purchasing investments. And so now we're able to see those returns in the future years. So all in total, the general fund revenues reflect an increase of $3.6 million as compared to last year's budget. Looking at the expense side for the general fund, under source of supply, there's an increase for Sigma expenses. We have a proposed budget of $510,000, which is an increase of $455,000. And this is just related to the update of the 5-year plan for the Indio subbasin. Overall, the source of supply expense shows a proposed budget decrease of $197,000 compared to last year. State water project expense. Expenses for the state water project are based on the actual charges for the remaining calendar year of 2025. And then we also estimate the expenses based on the Department of Water Resources Bulletin 132 for the January through June costs. So these resulted in a increased expense for the Delta OMPNR of $350,000, but a decrease for the transportation expense of about $1 million. And then our state water project variable OMPR expenses has a proposed decrease of $3.2 million. And this is based on a 60% allocation of deliveries for the year. So overall, state water project expenses, we have a proposed decrease of $3.6 million compared to last year's budget. Whitewater hydro expense have a decreased proposed budget of $8,700. For administrative and general expenditures, we have a proposed increase of $174,000 compared to last year's budget. But I wanted to highlight once again the grass removal expenditure budget of $534,000, which is a decrease of last year's budget of $245,000. And then I wanted to highlight that this is a shared cost between both the operating and general funds, so both of those budgets are set at the same amount. So in total, expenses for the general fund are budgeted at $26.4 million, which is a decrease of $3.1 million from last year's budget. The general fund pays the bond service for the 2016 bond refinance. The 25-26 payment will be a little bit over $1.3 million. This reflects in this budget year will reflect a $300,000 savings from the original bond issuance, and then cumulative through 25-26, that's a $3 million savings from the original bond. In the general fund, we have proposed capital additions of increase of $86,000. Major projects include the state water project. We have a capital budget request of $7.8 million. And then there's an augmentation to the Mission Creek Recharge Facility flow meter project of about $634,000. In the general fund, we have a carryover of a little over $1 million from existing capital projects that are not yet complete. This includes $450,000 for the Chino West Canyon filtration plant and about $300,000 for operations center upgrades. So based on those proposed budget figures, we'll actually can add about $43.1 million to general fund reserves. These additions will mainly go into the state water restricted funds, and that will get us to the level where we are in. So we take the activity related to state water project fund, and those revenues are restricted. And so when we apply the restricted expenses to those, we have a pot of money that's left over that we have to set our reserves to match. And so these additions into the state water contract fund and additional state water project will bring us in line with our restricted revenue. Next, we'll go to the wastewater fund. Wastewater service revenue has a proposed increase of $109,000. This is primarily attributed to a rate increase in the CVWD sewer services that we collect and then remit to CVWD. That increase will be effective July 1st of 2025. It also includes a Desert Water Agency increase from $7.60 per EDU to $8.03, which would be effective January 1st of 2026 if adopted. Just wanted to highlight then on the expense side for the wastewater fund, once again, the CVWD, that expense has increased since their rates will increase. We'll be collecting more. Their rate will go up to $31.96 per EDU, which is an increase of $29 or from $29.48 last budget cycle. And then just highlighting that there has been no changes in the City of Palm Springs wastewater service rates. So overall, wastewater budgeted expenses will be $2,051,550, which is about a $30,000 increase from last year's budget in the wastewater fund. Any questions on any of the proposed budgets?
I'm sure there will be. So we'll start with Director Gracia.
Well, last Friday, I attended a meeting with the Riverside County Water Task Force, and the subject was fleet electrification. A couple of things you talked about kind of brings me to ask these questions. Just the $300,000 for updates to the facility and the fleet electrification, the building of power. Mr. Tate had touched on this many months ago, that there was some movement on that in our. When I look out there, I see the vehicles stacked in there so tight, you know, when they're all lined up. And then you talk about upgrading the, so I'm like, where are you going to put all this stuff? Am I wrong about how tight we are in space out there? And when I looked at what they were showing as what was required for each charging station, they had like 6 feet between each vehicle. I don't know if it was overstated for the drawings but it looked like you got to be pretty skinny to get into the cab of one of these pickups out back. So
I'll take that.
you can also say that's not a budget question.
No. Well, in our budget, we do have, I think it's $1.6 million for vehicle replacement. That's primarily due to the diesel issue that we are facing with AQMD. But we are also are facing the fact that we do have to purchase electric vehicles too. And the plan is we have an area, what we call our North 40, which is just east of our visitors parking lot. It's a area that is used for scrap parts and so forth. That will be cleared out. It's already base paved, and that will be the area that we will put our charging stations in. We'll put some covers in, and there's enough space there to do a lot of vehicles, and having that base already in and so forth will help with the not having to put asphalt in and so forth. So, but that is the plan for the future when we get more into the EV vehicles.
Good.
Yeah.
When the, you know, they got to update 150 trucks, I think this year at Western, and I thought, wow, they're really moving forward with that. And that they got grants and all kinds of money thrown at them to, I think they're very good friends with Congressman Calvert. We need to work on that, I think. And that's where that comes from, you know. So that's it. You know, it just from my perspective, you know, having seen what I saw, it didn't seem like there was any way that we were going to make that work. I'm glad to hear you got a way to fit it all in. Good news.
Thank you. Director McKenna?
First of all, a follow-on to that, are we providing, do we have a plan to provide charging stations for employee parking at some point?
At this time, there is nothing budgeted for that, but potentially future budgets, there may be potential for that.
1 in 4 vehicles registered in California last year was an EV. So are we saying to our employees, don't buy an EV? I hope we're not. Let's look at that. And a couple of questions or comments. It's nice to see the property tax rate being reduced again. It was 10 cents per $100 valuation when I joined this board, and then it was 8, and then it was 7, and now it's going to be 6. I don't know that we get the word out. So that good piece of news, every business, every home in our district is going to have a property tax reduction. I know it saved me $100 the first time, $150 the second time, it's $200 now. This is not a small sum of money, and when our brethren at Mission Springs complain about the pass-through for replenishment access charge, we should remind them we're reducing their property taxes too. So something that we have the ability to do. So I appreciate that. I think we should get the word out on that. Some of these numbers in the budget are big, you know, some big increases in expenditure, but when I look at it, I see a lot of capital improvement buried in there. In my previous experience in the private sector, that wouldn't even be in our profit and loss statement. That's, you know, exchanging one asset, money in the bank, for another asset, sorry, a functioning piece of equipment. So when you see these big numbers, it's worth bearing in mind that we are gaining real value for them. I had a particular question on the Mission Creek Recharge Facility metering. We've, for a long time, not been comfortable with the numbers we get from Metropolitan. We don't know that meters properly when the pipe is not completely full, and we had a program element to put a meter pit in there. I see it in the budget. What's the time frame for doing that?
Right now, they're currently designing that, so I would say hopefully by the end of the year, if not mid next year, those meters will be in place. And they will be used to confirm what MET's meter is reading. That's the intent of that, to ensure that MET's meter is, we're validating that the meter that they have is reading properly, because we have had in the past issues with that meter, especially when the aqueduct changes in elevation due to pump flow and so forth, potential issues with inaccurate reads. So we want to make sure that we're getting the proper amount of water that they say we're getting.
Right, good. Glad to hear it, thanks.
All right, Secretary Treasurer Bloomer?
I don't have any questions. We reviewed all this in much more detail in the Finance Committee meeting.
Yeah, all right. Vice President Bowman?
Yeah, Jason, is this your first time presenting, but overlooking this budget?
Yeah, I mean, from an overall perspective, I mean, you know, I've had to look at components of it in the past for certain, you know, things, but yeah, from an overall perspective, yeah. And I will say that Finance Director Sines does a great job in building out a platform to be able to every year put this together. And so that was a huge help. I didn't have to start from ground zero at all.
That's wonderful. Are you happy with this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Happy with what?
With the numbers that you're providing?
Yeah.
Any red flags to you?
No.
right?
Well, I'd like to point out that the tax rate started at 50 cents, and to see it go to 6 is a huge thing. It's in 1961 or whatever. And, they brought it down, brought it down, brought it down. And the efficiencies in the system, both at the agency and statewide, is quite remarkable. And I don't think anybody gets the credit for that they deserve. And I just wanted to point that out. So thank you.
All right. Just a few comments. Some of the things that we're going to talk about tomorrow in the workshop were touched on here today, having to do with conservation particularly, having to do with the turf rebate program. I'm going to save I think I'm going to save my questions for tomorrow. I'm assuming, of course, that there will be representation at this workshop from finance, whether it's one or both of you, because I think those are some of the questions I will have tomorrow as far as how the budget reflects some of the things that we're talking about in this workshop tomorrow afternoon. I think the thing that stood out to me the most, and again can be saved for more conversation tomorrow, I believe, is the reduction in the turf program. Not sure what kind of signal that sends, but I don't really want to get into a discussion about it right now. I just want to kind of highlight that.
If I may provide a little bit more background on that, it essentially is not a reduction from the original budget last year. The original budget last year was $1 million for turf, split between the general and operating fund. And so we just put forth that same proposal of $1 million, understanding that last year, based off the conditions and the response that we were receiving during the year, mid-year, we did a budget augmentation. So we just started at that $1 million so that we could wait essentially as a placeholder and get the feedback from the board on how we pursue the funding for our conservation programs to be able to, we still have the opportunity to make adjustments for the budget that will come back to you in 2 weeks for approval. We will have your feedback and we will be able to build that in if adjustments seem necessary.
No, I understand. Yeah, I just wanted to highlight that one thing. And again, we'll talk more about that tomorrow. I'm glad that we'll see at least one of you there, if not both of you. And with that, unless there's anything else, we can move to 8C, which is Board Directors Compensation Evaluation. You have a busy morning.
Yeah, kicking it off, first time. So starting back in May of 2020, we have brought forth the Director's Compensation Evaluation to the board. We did actually bring it to the Finance Committee. And so while the Finance Committee did not recommend as to whether they would like to propose an increase, they wanted it to be brought forth to the entire board for you guys to see if there was an appetite for an increase. So just as a background, included in the staff report is a survey of other agencies and their board compensation. And then according to California Water Code, an increase can be made once a year, as high as 5%. But when talking with the Finance Committee, they did say that while they're not proposing an increase, that if the board would like to pursue an increase, that we keep it in line with the CPI adjustment of 2.6. That is the COLA adjustment that will be provided to agency staff. So based on that, a 2.6% increase would bring the rate per meeting to $436.68, which would be about a $6,300 increase in the budget related to director's compensation. And then also included in the staff report is you have a historical comparison of the director's compensation through the years.
Okay.
And then, so if the board would like to pursue an increase, we would have to bring it back to the board, bring an ordinance back to the board. The earliest we could do that would be July 1st, because there is a public hearing that we would have to go through, and then increase can only be effective 60 days after that it was adopted. And so the earliest that it could be effective would be August 30th.
All right. So, Director Gracia, do you have any comments?
This is just direction, not going to require a motion, right?
That's correct, direction.
Yeah, I would ask the board to direct them to bring this back as a actionable item, July 1st.
All right.
At 2.6.
All right. And Director McKenna?
I think I would like to see it after we decide what the employee cost of living increase would be. I think what we've done in the past is we've matched that. So until we do the employee cost of living, I don't think we should address
I believe
this.
that's already been done.
Yeah, that will be
2.6 is
2.6%
already-
as well, and that will
My
be presented
mistake.
at the next budget
I'm
meeting.
losing my sense of.
We talked to the finance committee about the 2.6% increase. It's going to come to the board at the next meeting with this new salary chart to be approved.
Oh, so you,
But 2.6 is the number.
2.6?
Yes.
Okay, well,
Correct. March CPI.
I must have missed that. Okay, well, I would be fine with 2.6% increase when you bring it back to us.
Okay. And Secretary Treasurer Bloomer?
I'm in favor of bringing back the ordinance.
Okay. And Vice President Bowman?
In favor of that as well.
Okay. I guess we'll see it come back.
All right.
All right. Thank you. All right. That brings us to item 9, which is the Secretary Treasurer's report. Ms. Bloomer, for April 2025.
Okay, these are the financial highlights for April 2025. In the operating fund, we received $3,717,649 in water sales revenue receipts, $56,055 in recycled water sales revenue receipts, $9,456 in SCE, Snow Creek Hydro revenue receipts, $180,763 in construction deposits from various projects throughout the city of Palm Springs, $102,199 in miscellaneous receipts from CVWD for regional grass replacement program reimbursements. We paid out a total of $2,518,085 in accounts payable. Year-to-date water sales are 14% over budget. Year-to-date total revenues are 18% over budget, and year-to-date total expenses are 10% under budget. There were 23,710 active potable services billed in April compared to 23,598 billed in March, for a net increase of 112 active services. Account disconnections, there were 0 water accounts turned off for non-payment in April due to utility billing go live. Over the past 12 months, the average of 27 accounts per month turned off for non-payment, which is 1.3% annual disconnection rate. And in the general fund, we received $1,837,337 in property taxes and $352,674 in state water project refunds. And we paid $1,648,149 in state water project charges. And year to date, $19,188,832. In the wastewater fund, $119,361 in wastewater revenue receipts. And we had no payables. March revenues remitted to CVWD and City of Palm Springs in May. Active sewer accounts, there were 2,244 active sewer accounts billed in April compared to 2,246 in March. So that's a net decrease of 2 active accounts. And that is it for the financial highlights. If anybody has any questions
Any questions, Director Grasha?
for Director Sines.
The one question that jumps out on this was on the Snow Creek power generation. Are we measuring the water that comes through that pipeline and how much water we're taking, or?
Yes, we measure the diversion at the headworks.
Okay. And do you know offhand what our water right is compared to what we're actually running through that pipeline?
So our water right on Snow Creek is 5.5 CFS, and on average, we do about 4.
Okay.
There's just due to weather constraints.
And in acre feet, what is that in a year? Do you know? I mean, you know, it always goes to the place where you see, it's just an interesting statistic that I think we should know. It's a pipeline, and I should know. I want to know. I want to be able, when it comes up, I want to say, well, that's how much
I'm
water.
going to put the caveat here that this is a thumbnail quick calculation.
Okay.
5.5 CFS is around 4,000 acre feet.
Okay.
So we're using about 2,800 acre feet.
Okay. Good.
Snow Creek.
Good to know that. Thank you.
I have no questions.
Director
Thank you.
McKenna. Okay, thank you. Secretary Treasurer Bloomer?
No questions.
No? All right. And Vice President Bowman?
None from me.
None for me. All right. Move on to our item 10, which is our general manager's report. Mr. Johnson, please.
Thank you, President Ortega. With my upcoming retirement, I thought this would be a good opportunity to hand this report over to the upcoming general manager, Esther Sines, and have her take this over. So, and you'll notice there's been some changes to the formatting, and it looks much nicer. So, so Esther, it's yours.
I got my fingers on it. I have to change it just a little bit. Okay, for the general manager's report for this board meeting, we would like to highlight we had the California Special Districts Association legislative days that we had President Ortega and also staff member Director of Conservation and Public Affairs, Victoria Lort, in attendance. And during that time, they were able to meet with Assembly members Greg Wallace and Jeff Gonzalez, as well as Senator Rosalie Ochoa-Bowe. And in doing so, they're able to advocate for DWA priorities, including supporting the Delta Conveyance Project trailer bills, and share our concerns about other legislation that may impact DWA and other similar water agencies. As a result of those conversations, Assemblymember Wallace expressed his interest in learning more about the Delta Conveyance Project, and we were able to arrange for the State Water Project to speak to the Inland Empire Caucus meeting on May 27th. And also, in addition, Assemblymember McKenna is circulating a letter on behalf of the water community that is in support of the DCP trailer bills. We have signed on to this Assemblymember McKenna letter, as well as the Inland Empire Caucus support letter. So moving on to system leak data, you'll see that over the past 2 weeks, since May 15th through May 26th, we had a total of 19 leaks. And of those, many of them are in future CIP, but we have about 4 of them that are already scheduled. We have 2 of them that are awarded on Potencio and Barristo Road. And we have the schedule on Warb Sands and Camino Paracela for summer of 2025, and the Desert Way main is in late 2025. I'd like to point out in the packet that you had received, the item in red on Tuckwitz Canyon Way, it indicated that it was asbestos concrete. And we went back and validated that because it is unusual for us to have water leaks on asbestos concrete mains. And it was determined that this was actually a record-keeping error and that it was, in fact, a steel main. And so now that we have our GIS system, it affords us with great benefits, but it still comes with, we need to validate information that comes out of it because it is geolocation. Where you're standing has a great impact on the information that it pulls in, and this was on a junction. So on a junction between a asbestos main and a steel line, a steel pipe. So with that, we validated and verified with our construction department that that leak actually did happen on that steel side of that junction and not on the concrete side of that junction. So we have made the update here and validated that the information provided you last week about the asbestos pipe that had indicated that there was a leak on it. It in fact did not. It was the same instance. And for those 19 leaks, we expended 124.5 labor hours. And to highlight some, these are my meetings as well, but Steve's are kind of represented in here as well. We are undergoing contract negotiations for our IT consultant and attended the State Water Project and DC Delta Conveyance meetings. We had the Budget Finance Committee meeting on May 21st, as well as we are starting the investigation into the potentials for budget-based rates or tiered rates for the agency. So we are doing our investigation there. So we had a great meeting with our previous rate consultant, NBS. We've had our executive committee meeting and our strategic planning meeting where General Manager Johnson and I were able to go over the progress and outcomes of all of the interviews with staff, as well as our normal weekly department head meetings, and then brings us here today at our board meeting. Among the ongoing activities, just to highlight, the Sites Reservoir is definitely a substantial part of time that is spent and is picking up speed in we are getting closer to points where we will be determining for future involvement. So there will be more to come on that in future board meetings. And also, we are kicking off our exchange agreement extension negotiations with CVWD and Metropolitan Water District, and that's it for the exchange of our State Water Project water for the Colorado River water through the aqueduct. So that is beginning because our current negotiations, our current agreement ends in 2035, which was our original end of our contract for the State Water Project. State Water Project contract has now been extended to 2085, so we are many years ahead of when our exchange agreement with Metropolitan is expiring, but we are beginning those negotiations now. And also working heavily on that strategic planning. So, and with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Director Grasha?
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
All right. Director McKenna?
I have two. When is the strategic plan coming back to the board?
I believe it will still be probably like at least 2 board meetings away before it comes back. So we have gone through all of essentially the actions that help to support the strategic objectives. So General Manager Johnson and I, we have gone through everything that was submitted that will then be, and so that has been, I don't want to say massaged or curtailed, but it's been refined more, and then it will be going back to, we're having a department head meeting of all the departments to go over that, and then I believe the next step would be taken to the committee, and then after that is where we'll kind of get our next steps, whether it's ready to come to the full board or not. But it will not happen any sooner than July 1st, in my opinion.
I have another one, but I realize it's better in director's comments, so I'll wait.
All right, Secretary Treasurer Bloomer
No questions.
and Vice President Bowman.
None for me?
All right, none for me, so I guess we can now move to directors' reports on meetings and events attended on behalf of the agency, which is item 11 on our agenda, and we'll start with Director Grasha, please.
Okay. Starting on the 20th, our last board meeting, on the 21st, we had a Finance Committee meeting for the our Board Finance Committee meeting. On the 22nd was the Desert Valley Builders Association meeting here at the Surf Park that I participated in with, I don't know if we were all there, but a bunch of us, which I'm grateful for. I know that I think it's a good exercise for us to get out there with that kind of stuff. On the 28th, the Coachella Valley Water District Board meeting. And then later that afternoon, their meetings start at 5 o'clock, which is the San Gorgonio Pass. Let me get the full name of that. Regional Water Alliance. That's all the pass agencies. I attended that meeting as well, which is not part of our typical. It's a hard meeting to get to at 5 o'clock, believe it or not. But I've been to maybe 4 of them over the 6 years. They have 4 meetings a year. It was a very informative meeting. As I recall, they were all pretty well worth the time to be there. But this one, they went into some things that are a direct effect to our work here. I understand we've got they talked about our agency's involvement with a study where they're going to be recreating, I guess is the way to put it, the modeling that has been done by 3 separate agencies, I guess including ours at one point. The county has a way of doing the modeling on the water flow through the San Gorgonio Pass, and in an attempt to determine how much is there, how much stays there during different weather patterns, I guess, and there was a third agency that has another set of modeling. So they're going to, I guess, try to combine all of it and clarify it in some way and come up with one that everyone can agree on, which I have no idea why all of the politics of that are the way they are, but it sounded very interesting that you'd have 3 different agencies calculating that and coming up with different numbers. So it's always interesting to hear the different ideas on things. And then Aqua had a planning for a resilient water future in Orange County, and that was a meeting that talked about the work that they're doing down there with the water recycling, and the relationship with what's coming off the mountain and down the Santa Ana riverbed, which is the area where I grew up. And, I remember when they painted that bridge with the bicentennial flag on it. I don't know if you've ever seen that on the 91 freeway, but to learn about all of that stuff and how all that developed and is a big part of their water supply. And, a kid growing up, it's just a dry ditch. And then you find out that without it, they don't have much to rely on, which is why they have this state water project, of course. Then on the 30th, that was the Riverside County Water Task Force that I talked about that was on the subject of fleet electrification. And I think they had about 5 presenters, and each one of them had a different set of problems, all similar but completely different. And it was interesting to hear the different ways that the different districts are addressing that issue, and to have picked up little bits and pieces about what we're doing. And I guess Western is way out front on that, it looked like to me. They're, and it sounds like maybe because they got some money to do it, but I'm not sure about that completely, but that's what it sounded like. You know, they've got a, you know, they've already got their chargers in the ground and stuff like that, so. And then we had the, that brings us to today, so.
Thank you. Director McKenna?
I attended one outside meeting, which was the Desert Valley Builders Association meeting at the surf club next door. Great facility, was impressed. I have to apologize to my constituents. I ran on a platform of opposing water parks. And then I got an email from a mother of 4 who said it's the only affordable place I can take my kids on a hot day. So I take it all back. That's it for me.
All right, thank you. Secretary Treasurer Bloomer?
So on May 21st, we had the Finance Committee meeting. On May 22nd was the Desert Valley Builders Association mixer. And then on May 28th, I attended the Palm Springs Chamber mixer. And that's it.
Thank you. Vice President Bowman?
Yes, also on the 22nd, I attended the DVBA mixer, and I think it's been a number of years since I've been to one of those, and I believe it's good to have eyes on the other leaders and have them have eyes on us. The 29th Executive Committee, and the first I did the Security Snapshots Actor Prep.
All right. I appreciate the fact that everybody else was able to make that mixer at the surf club. I was not in town at that time, but I did attend the last one, and I thought it was well worthwhile. And I agree with Vice President Bowman. It's important, and also Director Grosh, I think, mentioned something similar. It's important for us to be there and be seen as, you know, part of this community and as part of the future development and growth of this valley, because we are. Director Sines basically took my thunder about the CSDA legislative days. It was the first time I've attended that event. I wasn't quite sure how it was organized, and learned that a lot of the emphasis was having these joint, where groups of agencies, special districts and agencies from a certain geography would go and meet with the legislators for that particular geography. So we had already set up some meetings with the 2 assembly members and our state senator. We did not participate in the sort of the group effort, but I think that in fact we, and I was going to talk about Assembly Member Wallace's comments about this Inland Empire. I'm sorry? The Inland Empire Caucus, thank you. And he was the first person that we met with, and he seemed to latch onto that very quickly when we explained to him the importance of the Delta, and not that he didn't understand the importance of the Delta already, but particularly as it related to this trailer bill, and came up with that idea. And we then got to parrot that back to the other Assembly member, Gonzalez, as well as State Senator Ochoa Boa. And that seemed to really resonate with them, and I'm glad to see, I mean, the part I didn't know, learned just this morning, was what happened after that and how quickly it happened. And so, yes, there is some value to meeting with people in person, I guess, to make something like that happen, and happen in a very timely way. The other thing that was nice about those meetings is that we got to present each of them with a bottle of our water as a product of the district, and I think they all enjoyed that, and photos were taken, and I guess those are on our website, or not on our website, but on our social media postings. But that was it for me on in terms of additional meetings outside of what happens here inside the agency. And with that, we can move to item 12, director's comments and requests, and we'll start with Director Grasha.
Just to draw your attention to an article in the Voice of San Diego was released yesterday. It was a settlement and litigation between San Diego County Water Authority and the Metropolitan Water District. The article is both fascinating and filled with holes. And if anybody care to talk about the holes at some point, I suggest read it, and I'll fill you in on my theories, which are interesting. Thanks.
Okay, Director McKenna?
I might want everyone to read an article in the Los Angeles Times today by Ian James on the Colorado River. The snowpack this year was 89% of median. You got the water flowing into the Colorado River was 46% of average. I know there's a difference there, but I'm really worried about the Colorado River. If it gets to Deadpool in Lake Mead, which is currently only 31% full, the river stops flowing, which doesn't do us any good. Certainly it's a problem for the alfalfa growers. But even though we see the state water project, Shasta 81% full, Oroville 100% full, great water situation, but we can't recharge the aquifer without the Colorado River. So let's keep an eye on that, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you. Secretary Treasurer Bloomer?
I don't have anything.
All right, and Vice President Bowman?
Nothing further from me.
All right, nothing further from me. I see we can now move into closed session. I see 9:45. If we could meet in the boardroom at 10 o'clock, that would be great. Thank you, everybody. Portion of our meeting. We did, in closed session, we do have an item that we're going to take action on out here. And I guess I'm going to look to our director.
I'll make a motion.
You make a motion, please.
We conducted a employee evaluation of our general manager, and it seemed he was satisfactory to everybody, and I think it was enthusiastic. And we voted to take a vote out here to provide the full benefit for his extraordinary work of 10% bonus added to his salary for the past year. Was it over a year? Anyway, you did not throughout this whole process get adequate. I know in my own case, I keep thinking I almost got no time as general manager. And it's almost not fair that that was the case, but it was how it worked out, and I'm sorry for that. There was this overlapping kind of terms that kind of almost happening, but your work has been extraordinary, and home run on every ball that was thrown at you, and so as one director, I just want to thank you for that, and that's my motion.
Okay,
I'll second the motion.
thank you. For first from Director Grasha, and second from Secretary Treasurer Bloomer. And may we have a roll call vote, please?
And can I just clarify, that's for item 13F?
General manager review.
It is 13,
F, yeah.
F.
yes, thank you.
There might have been,
Thank you.
there might have been one too many.
Director Grasha,
Aye.
Director McKenna,
Aye.
Secretary Treasurer Bloomer,
Aye.
Vice President Bowman,
Aye.
and President Ortega.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. So with that, we can close this meeting for today. Thank you, everybody, for your help and support, and we'll see you tomorrow. That's right.